Never taking shorts cause Brooklyn's the borough.
Feels so good to be a Crooklyn Dodger. What's happening to rerun and Roger? I think I seen him wearing Timberlands and running down the block from Dwayne, and Dwayne had a Glock. Cause he be selling rock for the Partridge Family. And Ruben Kincaid drops a 300E. And he be pimping Chrissy from Three's Company. Plus he stuck Mr. T for all his jewelry. This is the 70s thing from the days when kids didn't act so crazy. Brooklyn.
Never taking shorts cause Brooklyn's the borough.
If there's one thing viewers can say for certain about Spike Lee, it's that he doesn't mind pushing the boundaries of cinematography. His stylistic choices are what set his work apart from other directors, but at the top of this unique set of nuances is the double dolly shot. This film-stopping technique causes the subject to appear to be floating through mid-air, almost as if they are occupying their own plane of existence and not adhering to the same laws of physics that everyone else is within the film. Much like anything else Spike Lee does, the shot has garnered a lot of mixed reviews. Regardless, Lee's use of the double dolly shot has played an integral role in delivering the messages within his films. Just about everything Lee does within the film world is for a reason, and the double dolly shot is absolutely no different. Among quite a few other purposes specific to the film that includes the shot is meant to disrupt the viewer's regularly scheduled programming of the film and immediately remind them that they are indeed watching a Spike Lee joint. Now, for some viewers and critics, it's not necessarily their cup of tea, right? And they say only specific intersections of the plot, character, and moment call for an effective dolly shot, while some stand up and cheer every time that they see it. Many uses of the dolly do not qualify as a double dolly shot. While they create a similar cinematic effect, it is just a single dolly, right? The stamp of a double dolly is exclusively designated for shots that consist of two dollies mounted on carts with wheels. One assisting the subject in their gliding motion, and the other to support the tripod-mounted camera on the track to follow and assist in the smooth isolation of the subject. Now, as far as the single dolly goes, Lee's first use was in 1988 with his second featured film, School Days. If the use of the shot was to disorient the crowd and grab their attention away from the plot, he picked the perfect scene to do so. In this scene, Dap, played by Lawrence Fishburne, repeatedly screams, "Wake up," to anyone and everyone who is listening. He's relatively disoriented himself and floating around campus like a dream, while everybody nearby gathers together to form a unified audience. The scene has nothing to do with the plot of the film and has everything to do with Lee warning viewers to wake up and realize the negative effects of colorism within the black community. He wanted to communicate the message without using the plot, so used the dolly. His first use of the double dolly shot came in 1990 with Mo Better Blues, when Lee took what seemed to be an urban drama to a wacky display of cinematic craft simply by using the double dolly. The scene included Lee himself portraying the character Giant, a manager for Denzel Washington's character. When Lee spotted his bookies, he floated while doing a 180 and went back to the direction from where he came from. Many critics have said Lee's first use of the shot lacked the depth and context that most of the other uses of the shot have. And that's coming from the source himself. "We were just doing it to show off," according to Lee, speaking on his use of the double dolly shot in Mo Better Blues. But then we both, him and Ernest Dickerson, came to a joint decision that we can't use the shot unless it helps the storytelling go forward. And it's been like that ever since. Lee's first attempt to use the shot to actually push the narrative within the film was in Jungle Fever, the 1991 film, which included two different shots, both including two subjects walking down the street talking in a similar fashion to each other. Now, the shot was visibly appealing for a lot of viewers, but Lee still hadn't quite figured out how to move the plot along with this effect. That was until 1992, when, according to Lee, his third try at using the shot in Malcolm X was one of its more iconic uses. The shot occurs when he is walking from his car to the Audubon Ballroom to make his first public appearance in days. He appears to be floating on the sidewalk with a content look on his face, being viewed by the camera from low to high, giving him some sort of divine appearance. Now here we can see Malcolm X, who was portrayed by Denzel Washington, in a state of floating divinity that takes him out of reality for a moment and arguably foreshadows his imminent death and ascension to heaven. Now the shot almost takes away Malcolm's personal autonomy and is forcing him forward into the fate of history. Lee was really getting warmed up with the technique by 1994 when he used the shot twice in Crooklyn. The first shot took place in Troy's dream, where she is being chased by a couple of dope fiends that we saw earlier in the film, one of them portrayed by Spike Lee. As she rolls along on the dolly, the addicts chase her, forcing her to sniff glue, and she ascends upward. Now, different critics, depending on who you ask, will tell you a different thing as to what this scene means and what the dolly does for the scene. But certain events have happened in Troy's life that she cannot comprehend or deal with. And their dreams serve as a coping mechanism and a metaphor for the lack of control that she has in her hectic Brooklyn life. The dolly in the situation, and the crane associated with the dolly, was used to kind of take away Troy's autonomy. She floats up, she ascends to this high plane with a blank look on her face. She's no longer making her own decisions, she's completely out of control, and the madness surrounding her life is taking her over. Toward the end of Lee's 1995 film, Clockers, he includes a number of dolly shots. The first shot shows a disgruntled Mackay Pfeiffer who portrays the character Strike, who is walking next to his housing projects when he looks up around to see a gangster high out of his mind by his car. This encapsulates the raw emotion of Pfeiffer while he's being pulled into witnessing something he does not want to see. The second shot shows a child with a gun hidden in a brown paper bag moving toward the gangster. Now the dolly is pulling Shorty, the name of the child, towards the gangster, leaving the audience in anticipation for what is to come next. The third shot shows a profile view of the boy on the bike, but includes a detective, portrayed by Harvey Keitel, reenacting the scene of the crime, which is extremely creative and leaves the audience with a visual they absolutely will not forget. By the time the late 90s rolled around, viewers were surprised if they didn't see the shot in one of Lee's films. The 1996 film, Girl 6, includes two shots, with one having much more to do with the narrative of the film, when Judy, portrayed by Teresa Randall, is on the phone with a stalker, going over a sexual fantasy. He's asking her if she's really beautiful because he saw something on Oprah that said that girls on sex lines aren't beautiful, and she floats back and forth on a dolly, signifying her losing her right mind and her sanity. Next was in 1998 in He Got Game, when Lee threw Jesus Shuttlesworth, portrayed by Ray Allen, on a dolly during the closing credits. His last 90s shot was in 1999 in Summer of Sam, which was used to portray Vinny, played by John Leguizamo, floating down the street in a drunken haze. Moving forward to the turn of the century, Lee's use of the double dolly shot in his 2000 film Bamboozled does as much to set the stage for what's to follow as any opening sequence could. The film's main character, Pierre Delacroix, as portrayed by Damon Wayans, is a stuck-up, morally confused, and unrealistically proper television writer. Now, Delacroix is moving about his apartment on a double dolly in a figure-8 pattern while reading the definition of satire and introducing his personalized fantasy version of himself. In this scene, Delacroix introducing the fake character he tries to be is sensationalized because it's as if he's a made-up character. He doesn't need to walk because he's not real. He can just float around here on these dollies. The 2002 film 25th Hour contains a trio of double dolly shots, which have all been heavily revered by critics. First two double dollies were used to represent euphoria and lust in a dreamlike state. First was when Monty, played by Edward Burns, dollies into the VIP section as the camera trails behind. Next, we see Anna Paquin dollying toward the VIP booth with the camera following in front of her. Sweaty from dancing and high on ecstasy, her slow and dazed movements show how out of her right mind she is. The third double dolly came directly after the first two and is perhaps the most powerful. Right after Jacob, portrayed by Philip Seymour Hoffman, kissed his student in a drunken haze, he exits the room and dollies towards the viewer with this iconic look of fear, confusion, regret, and emptiness. Next up is Lee's 2006 box office smash hit Inside Man, which included a very well-known use of the shot. And lead detective Frazier, portrayed by Denzel Washington, finds out the bank robber had apparently killed a hostage. He immediately leaves the police van and heads towards the bank on a fast and bumpy dolly with an angry and determined demeanor, while a chaotic frenzy of what looks like SWAT team members and police officers scramble in the background. The use of the dolly here takes Washington from a group of detectives and officers trying to handle the hostage situation into an isolated state of rage where he appears to be embarking on a solo mission. His demeanor says so much without him saying a word. A relatively recent use of the shot, and an extremely powerful one at that, was in Lee's 2012 film Red Hook Summer. During a sermon delivered by the good Bishop Enoch Rouse, played by Clark Peters, Blessing Rowe, played by Coleman Domingo, got up in the back of the church when Enoch asked if there was any outsiders who wanted to be saved. Rowe had previously been molested by Enoch 15 years prior and had been looking for him ever since. He slowly dollies toward Enoch, increasing in passion and rage, reciting biblical scriptures he heard from Enoch when he had been molested. The double dolly serves as two things here. One is a representation of how long it took Roe to find Enoch because of how slow the dolly is moving him. The second shows a direct relationship between Roe facing his fears by approaching his attacker and his raw emotion that is surfacing. As the dolly pushes him forward, it also cranks up his emotional response. Lee's most recent film, Black Klansman, included the iconic shot in one of its final scenes. The use of the shot here creates a sense of being carried by historical force that can't be overtly seen. Officer Ron Stallworth, portrayed by John David Washington, Denzel's son, and his activist girlfriend become a visual representation of blaxploitation, reminiscent of Shaft and Coffee, when they dolly down the hall, pistols drawn and all, toward the sight of a cross burning outside. While they may have had some big wins in the realm of seeking equality, the film ends on a note to show that there is a seemingly unending amount of work that needs to be done. Although Lee has owned all things dolly in the last 30 years, he has said that he did not invent the dolly shot, but rather pulled on inspiration from a couple of other filmmakers and revolutionized. The earliest examples of the double dolly shot was by Melvin Van Peebles in his film The Story of a Three-Day Pass in 1967, when a U.S. soldier, portrayed by Harry Baird, stationed in France, enters a club gliding through the air being tracked by a smooth-moving camera. Baird had previously just encountered his alter ego in the mirror, who told him to be a good, obedient, cheerful, and frightened to date a white girl in order to appease the captain. His gliding through the club represented a man who was hiding behind a facade. This scene clearly shows that this man, and society for that matter, had a ways to go before he can walk on his own feet, hold his ground, and feel at home. The other relevant historical example of the double dolly shot was used by one of Lee's biggest influencers, that is Martin Scorsese, in his 1973 film Mean Streets. In the scene, Harvey Keitel is making his way through a party in a drunken haze while floating around on a dolly. This use of the dolly to represent an intoxicated lack of control is something Lee recreated in several of his films some 20 plus years later. So this is nuts. The most connective aspect between Lee admiring this film and applying Scorsese's technique is in Clockers. We talked about it a little earlier. It's the film in which Scorsese actually co-directed. Lee casted Keitel as a detective and threw him up on a dolly for a scene to bring an early inspiration around full circle. No matter what focus Lee is looking to narrow in on, the double dolly shot's inventiveness, inevitable in-your-face result takes the viewer from watching a character navigate through a plot to watching the same character move through a setting that is, in a way, outside of the plot. Right, wrong, or in between, Lee has undoubtedly moved the climate of filmmaking forward in a direction that it was not going before he had started. Most of that is the historical importance of a black director giving a voice to the community and opening the gates for black filmmakers. But some of it is the unique stylistic decisions that have created inventive cinematic effects such as the double dolly.